Hello, my friend Alan came round the other day with a pile of old motorcycle magazines that his wife found in a charity shop, and he lent me them to have a look through, and I've been having a fascinating time looking through them, so much so that I thought it was worth making this quick video just to share it with you. And I'll just focus on one, because this one I'm looking at the moment is from June 1964, which means that this motorcycle magazine is 60 years old. And it's really interesting looking at how motorcycle magazines have changed in the last 60 years. So let's have a dive into this and just have a look and see, what were motorcycle magazines, what did they contain, what were they talking about 60 years ago? Very interesting. This magazine is Motorcycle, Scooter and Three-Wheeler Mechanics from June 1964. So as I said a minute ago, it's 60 years ago, is that. And if you're interested in inflationary cost of magazines, the price there, £1.09 old pence as well. Obviously, if you're not old enough to remember that, the D stands for an old pence. So one of the things that struck me immediately about this, well, two things really. The interests of bikers remain pretty much the same, but the style of the magazine is slightly different. Obviously, it's older paper, not so many colour pictures, things like that. But there seems to be more, if I just flick through, seem to be more illustrations rather than photographs. So here's a good example. Here's an advert, and they're sort of the drawings. Again, here's another advert, and they're drawings rather than photographs. So that's a sort of just a stylistic difference that's changed. Maybe it's just cheaper for the printing or what have you. Another thing that's interesting is you can see here there's a bit being cut out, and it's a coupon here. There's this advert here for the latest, and best at the time Triumph Bonneville T120. Is it a T120? I think, yeah, which is a 650cc bike. Remember, this is 1964. But if you want more information, these days they'll have a website address for you. Well, of course, no websites back then. So, and I remember this, I remember magazines, it just brought it back to me. Whoever had this magazine, there's quite a few pages where these little coupons have been clipped out, and you cut out that coupon, you filled in your details, you sent it off to them, and then they posted you out their catalogue details, things like that, and that's a lovely sort of reminder of pre-internet days. Another aspect of the magazine is interesting is looking at what kind of bikes they are talking about in the magazine, and what kind of bikes are being advertised. And obviously, in 60 years motorcycling's moved on, there's some manufacturers disappeared, new manufacturers coming up. But interestingly, it's not all just British bikes. Obviously here's an advert for Triumph, but if I flick through, I'll show you there's adverts for other bikes as well. Here's an advert for Honda, for Hondas. Here's an advert for Royal Enfields. Here's an advert for Yamahas. And here's an advert for the BSA Bantam. My dad used to have BSA Bantam back in the day, and this would be, around about the time when these were the bee's knees as commuter bikes. This is the 175, the Bantam Super. My dad's was just a 125. Here's an interesting feature page where they're looking at, different bikes, the latest bikes, different categories, under 100cc, under 250cc, and then under 350cc. You can see there's another coupon being cut out here. But you can see it's interesting to have a look what bikes there are. So, we're talking about BSA, an Ariel. That's a Triumph scooter there. Then under the 250s, we've got a Royal Enfield, a Velocette, a Francis Barnett. Remember, I think the next door neighbour had one of those when I was a kid. And then under 350cc, we've got the Royal Enfield. We've got a BSA here, and we've got a Triumph. And then we got to the under 500cc. We've got a Norton, the Triumph Tiger 100. and another Velocet. We're missing some here because the Coupons be cut out, but over 500cc we've got another Royal Enfield, and then the competition bikes. The only one I can see here is this the Cobra Scrambler from Cotton. Again, if you're into classic bikes as I am, you'll be familiar with all of these anyway, and these bikes are still around. But it's lovely looking at a motorcycle magazine from when these were the latest bikes, that people were getting excited about buying because they'd just come out. As I pointed out at the beginning of the video, this is a motorcycle mechanics magazine, so obviously there's these kind of how-to type things. And one of the things I was looking at of this was, and it's very difficult for me to evaluate, so I'd be interested to know what you think, whether it's pitched in at the same kind of level as today's sort of motorcycle mechanic magazines, or whether it assumes a higher level of mechanicking knowledge and competence. I'm not sure. It's difficult for me to judge because I have got a reasonable level of experience with home mechanicking. It seems to me that it does assume that you're willing to take on fairly complex jobs. However, it doesn't seem to assume specialist tools or specialist knowledge. It's imparting fairly basic knowledge. Here's another article aimed at scooter this time, and it's a restoration project, restoring, restoring. So you can see here, there's using a hammer here to knock out dents, sanding down, respraying by hand here, with a rattle can, all the kind of things which should be of interest and within the capability of most DIYers. Looking through at the articles, I would say that much of this magazine covers the same issues as we would expect to see in a current magazine like this, because it's aimed at what bikers are interested in, and bikers are interested in the same things. So tyres, learning more about tyres, what's the best tyres for your bike, have a look, helmets, there's articles and helmets, adverts for insurance, for clothing, things like that. And there's some very interesting articles. I'll just flick to another page to show you one which particularly caught my attention. This is an article about what tools and spares to take with you when you go on a motorcycle tour. And I made a video about this very same topic a while back, and putting together a touring toolkit and spares kit for my Triumph Scrambler 1200, and here we are addressing exactly the same issues 60 years ago. And you can see the kind of things that it's suggesting that you take with you are all the sensible things that are still relevant today. Maybe a little bit more because back then bikes were less durable, less reliable, so things you would expect, like a spare inner tube, puncture repair kit. Obviously you've got tubeless tyres these days, you just have puncture repair kit, spare bulbs, a chain breaker, spare cables, spare spark plugs. But then some things which I think these days most people wouldn't take unless they were riding a classic bike, such as spare valves and springs, new gaskets, piston rings. Some people carry those these days, but it depends on what kind of bike you're riding and where you're going. And it carries on over the page here, spare piston gear. It's quite comprehensive, but obviously it's going to be comprehensive because it's a magazine article about it, and they wouldn't want to be producing an article which undersells these things, shall we put it that way. Here, down this side of the page, is another very interesting article, which I don't think you'd see something like this in one of today's magazines. It's a cash-saving tip with motorcyclists, how to get motorcycle riding gear together on the cheap. So, you can see from the headings here, cheap coat, and, what you do with your old engine oil, recycling your engine oil. It's not, I hate to say, suggesting, pour it out in the garden or whatever. It's just, it's suggesting ways that you can reuse that oil for other things. I've just flicked to the back of the magazine here, just move it up a little bit, because this is in the sort of the classified ads at the back. And this is an interesting page because this is bikes for sale. So you unless you're reading this on a big screen, you might not be able to read these, but these are second-hand bikes being sold, and it's so interesting looking at the prices. I'll just read a few out to you. So we've got a BSA 150 Bantam there at, if I can read that right, £29 and 10 pence. Triumph 200 overhead valve T20, that is Tiger Cub. That is £59.10. So there's some bigger bikes. So we've got a Ariel 650 Huntmaster. That is, if I read that, £69. That one. Triumph 650 Thunderbird, £79. You know, just, yeah, again, it's really interesting look prices back there. And then we've got prices of some new bikes here. So new Motor Guzzi here. You can pay an £18 deposit and 36 payments of £2, 13 shillings and 10 pence. Yeah, lovely, taking us back to these days. It is also very interesting looking at how many names I recognise in this magazine. So here's an advert for Halfords, which if you live in the UK, you'll be very familiar with Halfords. Here's an advert for Castrol Oil. Pleased to say that they're still going strong, and that's still a preferred oil for a lot of people, including myself, putting it in the bikes. Here's an advert for Dunlop tyres, and again, still a good choice for a lot of people. Dunlop tyres still going very strong. And an interesting advert here for Kangol helmets. Certainly if you're British, you'll recognise Kangol helmets. But it's like this little feature. Remember, this is back in the days before helmets were compulsory. So, this little cartoon story here, this mother saying that my son's life was saved by wearing a helmet. So, back then they were trying to encourage people to wear helmets for safety rather than them being compulsory. And of course we've got our hints and tips page, and I haven't shown it, but there's a readers letters page and things like that, all the sort of things you expect to see in a magazine. So I'll stop there because I don't want the video to go on too long, but I just thought it was worth sharing. It's really interesting having a look through a motorcycle magazine from 60 years ago. So there you are, Motorcycle, Scooter and Three-Wheeler Mechanics from June 1964.